my dears, welcome back to another video. So recently I've been very curious about this new trend that's been happening at the moment when it comes to the topic of victimhood. It seems as though in the West we've developed this culture where we celebrate victimhood and we've empowered people to be victims. People actively want to be victims now. And I found it quite fascinating and quite interesting. And interestingly, it seems that many of you have as well. I've had multiple requests from people asking me to talk about this growing culture that we have at the moment of celebrating and embracing victimhood. I've always had an issue with pushing victimhood mentality onto people. And the reason why is because I remember years ago when I was in school, I studied psychology, and I remember we were learning about external and internal locuses of control. At the time, I remember learning that people who have an external locus of control typically tend to have worse outcomes. And I remember there was like a laundry list of all of the potential consequences that can happen to someone if they develop an external locus of control. And so for that reason, I've always had an issue with the fact that these kind of mentalities were very much pushed onto, well, people like me, people who are black, people who are female, and all this kind of stuff. Because it seemed as though in an effort to be compassionate towards certain groups and to try and help them, etc., people were pushing a mentality and a perspective that was ultimately going to harm them in the long run, especially now that these ideas are being pushed within the education system as well as on social media. So I wanted to dive a bit more into victimhood mentality to understand what it is about it that's appealing, why people have it, why it exists, and what is it about our modern society that encourages it and why is it being encouraged. And so all of that is what we'll be addressing in today's video. Andrea M. Darcy wrote an article for the Harley Therapy Mental Health blog in which she explains that victim mentality is a perspective where we see ourselves as innocent and believe that bad things are outside of ourselves and always happening to us. People with a victim mentality typically don't believe that things that happen are their fault. They tend to blame external sources and believe that things are usually happening to them as opposed to them having agency over their lives. So this is what is known within the psychology world as having an external locus of control.
Locus is defined as a position, point, or place, or more specifically, a location where something occurs. A person's locus of control may be internal or external. People who base their success on their own work and believe they control their life have an internal locus of control. In contrast, people who attribute their success or failure to outside influences have an external locus of control. For example, let's say you're a person with an internal locus of control and you get a promotion at work or achieve some other type of success. You will probably attribute that positive end result to the work you put in. In other words, your success was a direct result of your hard work. If, on the other hand, you have an external locus of control, you might attribute that promotion or success to external or environmental factors, such as luck, fate, timing, other people, or some type of divine intervention. Let's use the same example and say that you were denied a promotion. If your locus of control is internal, you would find a way to blame yourself for the perceived failure. If your locus of control is external, it would be easy, even natural, to blame outside sources beyond your control.
So victim mentality is a form of external locus of control. It's one of the many different types of external locuses of control you can have. So anytime someone blames external forces for their outcomes, so whether you blame your parents for your outcomes, whether you blame society or systems or a group of people, or you blame, anything that is outside of you, if you have a tendency or you know someone who has a tendency of blaming things outside of themselves for why their outcomes happen, then that is someone who has an external locus of control. Victim mentality is a coping mechanism. It usually develops in childhood because as children we are helpless. We rely on our parents or the adults around us to take care of us, to feed us, to resolve our problems. Because when we are that small, we're very vulnerable and we don't have a lot of control over our lives. So naturally it makes sense for us to look at the adults or the guardians in our life to be the ones to be able to do all these things for us. As you grow up and as you develop, you're supposed to outgrow this perspective, but some people don't outgrow it, and so they continue to have it in adulthood, and that's when it starts to present itself as a victim mentality. As we grow older and as we mature, rather than viewing ourselves as a helpless child who requires the help of outside external figures to resolve our problems for us or to take responsibility for our circumstances, we typically tend to develop more healthier coping mechanisms for how we deal with stress. Victim mentality mentality blinds people from their own power. They still play the role of the helpless child, and in the process they paralyze themselves, unable to take responsibility and make decisions that would move them forward. Deep down, sometimes they might even believe that they deserve to suffer. Usually those who think this way have unresolved trauma. For others, they may be stuck in a victim mindset because they feel it's the only way for them to get any attention, admiration, or love. Some people, having people feel sorry for them becomes their source of identity, and when this happens, it becomes even more difficult to come out of it. Another reason why some people might adopt the victim mentality is because of mimicking. Some children may learn to view themselves as victims because they witness adults doing so. If you saw your parents have this mentality, you are much more likely to adopt this worldview. Recently, victimhood has given people the power to elevate their status. When we start to understand the power and the attention that can be given to someone if they claim victimhood status, it starts to make sense of some very bizarre behaviors that we've seen in mainstream media in recent years. For example, with the Jussie Smollett hate crime hoax that took place in 2019.
Jussie Smollett, a longtime actor and star on the hit TV show Empire, tells police he's the victim of a brutal beating that took place on this Chicago street. Investigators say they're treating the reported attack as a possible hate crime.
Can you head over and check in a bearer report?
Early Tuesday morning, Smollett says he was approached by two men yelling out racial and homophobic slurs. Investigators say he was attacked. An unknown chemical substance was poured on him. Police adding, at some point, one of them wrapped a rope around the victim's neck. Smollett told police the men yelled, "This is MAGA, Make America Great Again country." The actor took himself to a hospital.
You didn't deserve, nor anybody deserves, to have a noose put around your neck, to have bleach thrown on you.
Lee Daniels, Empire's creator, posted then deleted this photo of Smollett, calling the attack a cowardly act.
However, as time went by, people started to become quite suspicious of Smollett because of the lack of evidence to back up his claims. And as more information came forward, it became very apparent that he had fabricated the incident.
The following day, January 30th, Chicago police released photos of two people of interest they want to question. Police say there's no video of the actual attack. February 1st, Smollett issues his first statement, saying his account has always been consistent.
The Empire actor disputes social media rumors that he hasn't been cooperative with police. Smollett telling Essence magazine he's been 100% factual and consistent on every level and believes justice will be served.
Fast forward to February 12th. Police say Smollett turned over some of his phone records, hoping to corroborate his account of the attack. Police say some parts were left out and ultimately didn't help. February 14th. Police say they're speaking to the two people of interest, two brothers from Nigeria. Smollett gives his first and only television interview to Good Morning America, adamant that he's telling the truth.
Number one, I want them to find the people that did it. Number two, I want them to stop being able to say alleged attack. Number three, I want them to see that I fought back.
The following day, February 15th, police released the two brothers, saying they are not suspects. February 16th, amidst growing skepticism, police sources begin telling reporters they're more certain it was a hoax and Smollett may have paid the brothers to stage the attack. February 20th, police officially classify Smollett as a suspect, pointing to grand jury testimony from the two brothers, along with detective work and piles of video.
It's the video that changed everything. The men in it, brothers who know Jussie Smollett and who've told their story to prosecutors and police. It is, sources say, a much different tale than the one the 36-year-old Empire star's been telling since the early morning hours of January 29th, when he says he was jumped by two men near his home in Streeterville.
Charges are later filed against Smollett for filing a false police report.
And recently, Meghan and Harry have been compared to Jussie Smollett because many find it hard to believe their recent claim that they were in a near-catastrophic 2-hour car chase in New York City.
Prince Harry and Meghan were followed by paparazzi while leaving the Ziegfeld Theater. Their spokesperson called it a near-catastrophic car chase. Others said it wasn't bad. But I think people in New York know if it was possible to have car chases, in New York, we'd all make it to the theater on time. But I think their spokesperson referenced something that you generally would reference in Los Angeles. That's where you have chases. That's where you can move at high speeds. Right. I think they were dealing with aggressive paparazzi.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was where, you know, you're watching on TV like this, watching the cars go, because, you know, you can't, it just doesn't work in New York.
No, I mean, sometimes I'm in the city and I hear an ambulance trying to get through, and I think that person's dead.
Yeah.
That person is dead.
Because you can't get through. I mean, it's crazy.
But what drives these public figures to fabricate these kinds of stories? Human beings work on incentives. No one would do something if they didn't think that there was going to be some kind of benefit to it. And I think that benefit can be understood by the fact that in today's day and age, victimhood is glorified and it can gain you a lot of popularity as well as power. In the case of Smollett, there were reports such as this one from The Guardian that stated that Smollett had made up the attack to advance his career. Chicago police superintendent said at a news conference that Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. In the case of Harry and Meghan, their choice to adopt victimhood has had them rewarded with awards, such as the one they received for fighting structural racism within the royal family, despite the fact that they later went on to deny that they ever said or implied that the royal family was racist.
In the Oprah interview, you accuse members of your family of racism. You don't even...
The British press said that.
Right.
Did Meghan ever mention that they were racist?
She said there were troubling comments about
there was concern about his skin colour.
Right. Wouldn't you describe that as essentially racist?
I wouldn't, not having lived within that family.
Not only that, but they've also been given podcasts as well as interviews, magazine covers, and also a docu-series. So it does leave one to wonder, what could they possibly gain from fabricating a 2-hour high-speed car chase in a city like New York, based on their track record of selling stories about themselves and their families for money? One can only speculate that perhaps they exaggerated the severity of what happened in order to sell the story of what happened through another interview or docu-series. It would explain why they tried to demand all of the photos and footage that were taken during their alleged car chase to be handed over to them, because they seem to not want anyone else to have the footage or the photos of the incident. As Backgrid, an entertainment photo agency, told the BBC that they received a letter from the Sussexes about the photos taken at the scene of the incident. The letter stated, "We hereby demand that Backgrid immediately provide us with copies of all photos, videos, or films taken last night by freelance photographers after the couple left their event and over the next several hours." I'm sorry, I had to read it like that because it just sounds like it should be read like that. Considering how much Harry and Meghan claim they hate the monarchy and the whole royal family, they sure act like they're still active members in it. Like, this letter just literally, it sounds like a royal demand. "We hereby declare." Maybe Harry and Meghan wanted to be the only ones who were able to profit from this scoop, or maybe they wanted to avoid any contradictory evidence floating around. Who really knows with these two? But regardless of that, Backgrid's response to them was iconic. Backgrid rejected the request in a very feisty response, as they said, "In America, as I'm sure you know, property belongs to the owner of it. Third parties cannot just demand it be given to them as perhaps kings can do. Perhaps you should sit down with your client and advise them that his English rules of royal prerogative to demand that a citizenry hand over their property to the crown were rejected by this country long ago. We stand by our founding fathers." Before social media, when people had to actually work hard to accomplish their success, it was very, very difficult for people to reach the same level of popularity and to receive the same amount of accolades. And the reason for that was because we didn't have Wi-Fi or smartphones to broadcast ourselves onto the world. We had to actually go through a ton of vetting processes. Because of that, people had a lot of respect for the underdog, because if you were someone who was deemed as an underdog, an unlikely person to succeed, people had a lot of respect for you, because if you are someone who comes from, say, like a poor background, who doesn't have a lot of access to things, etc., you don't have a lot of connections, but you somehow managed to make it, then it was a lot more impressive to people than people who were born into wealth or who already had success because of their parents or because of their connections. For many years, we always respected hard work and people with strong work ethics. And that's why the underdog was so appealing to us, because we knew that they had to work much, much harder than other people in order to accomplish their success. I have a theory that the reason why we are so supportive of the victim or people who claim to be part of a victim class or victim group is because of our love for the underdog. We've always traditionally loved the underdog, the person who was doubted, the person who was the least likely to succeed. And when they worked really hard and they managed to accomplish what other people thought they would not accomplish, we've always found those people to be worthy of our accolades and worthy of our celebration. And I think that the love that we've always had for the underdog is also what fuels our love for victims, because similar to the underdog, the victim is someone who you don't expect to succeed. You know, we have certain people who are classified as being part of a victim class. So, you know, if you're a woman, if you're black, if you've got a disability, if you're trans, if you're gay, etc., these are all groups that are regarded within the victim class. And so if you are someone within this group, then people naturally don't expect you to be able to accomplish certain things because they think that the whole entire system is rigged against you. So in the same way that the underdog was not expected to succeed because the odds were set up against them, the people who are deemed part of a victim class are also not expected to succeed because people believe that the system is rigged against them. And so in the same way that we celebrated the underdog because we didn't expect them to do very well, we also support the victim because we've kind of now view the victim as the new underdog. However, I think it's very important for us to not confuse the two. There is a very, very big difference between an underdog and a victim. The main difference being the underdog got their accolades and their celebrations because no one expected them to succeed, but they succeeded on their own merit. The victim, on the other hand, becomes successful because we support them because they are victims. The underdogs, we supported them because they were successful. Whereas with the victim, they're successful because we supported them. And if I had to give you an example of someone who I think is a very good representation of the underdog, I would say someone like Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder is a blind man, and so naturally because of that, you wouldn't expect him to be fantastic at playing the piano. You wouldn't expect him to be able to do all of the amazing things that he's able to do as a musician. He is an extremely talented musician. When you think of Stevie Wonder, you don't think of his disability, you think of how amazing he is at his craft. Whereas someone like Dylan Mulvaney is someone who you wonder if they would have reached the level of success that they've accomplished in such a very short space of time if it wasn't for the huge amount of support they got for being part of a victimized identity. The victim mentality and having an external locus of control is not without consequence. People who have an external locus of control and people who have an internal locus of control have been studied over long periods of time to see what their outcomes were like. And those who have more of an external locus of control or a victim mentality don't have the best outcomes long term. And this is one of the main reasons why I have a huge issue with the idea of pushing victim mentality onto large groups of people. People who have an external locus of control or who have a victim mentality are much more likely to suffer with mental health problems. So they are much more likely to have things like depression and anxiety. A South African journal on psychiatry recently, I've been trying to find studies that are not Western. Western researchers are compromised. It's hard to look into things anymore without having so much political undertones to them. So nowadays I'm trying to get like a variety of my stuff from like other countries that aren't as like super divided on this whole like left-wing, right-wing, conservative, liberal BS. So the article was called "The Relationship Between Locus of Control and Depression: A Cross-Sectional Survey with University Students in Botswana." And what the research found was that they consistently revealed a positive association with external locus of control and depression. The University of Botswana administered a survey to students which assessed the locus of control as well as the depression symptoms. And what they found was that the students who believed that they were in control of the events that were taking place in their lives were less likely to present with depressive symptoms, while those who believed that chance or a more powerful other dictated their outcomes scored much higher on depression scores. Mental health problems within university students have been widely studied, and there are a variety of reasons why university life can be stressful and straining on students. However, researchers have found that the outlook and the perspective of the student has a big effect on whether or not they view it as an opportunity for personal growth and a chance to challenge themselves, or if they view the experience as a prompt for mental health problems such as anxiety and depression. This study was really insightful in regards to understanding the effects of locus of control on depression and anxiety. However, because it was a very specific context in that it was a few hundred university students, we obviously understand that it can't be generalized onto the whole entire population because it is within a very specific context. However, I do think that this study is really good at helping us understand how your outlook on life and your locus of control can have a massive impact on your mental health. And it really got me thinking about a recent podcast episode I watched with Chris Williamson and Destiny, where they were discussing the reports that state that apparently people who tend to be more left-wing have much higher rates of depression and anxiety. And he was discussing with Destiny why he thinks this could be. And I thought that Destiny's insight into it was quite interesting, and it seems to align quite well with the findings of the Botswana study.
On a personal level, I understand that I exist as part of a system, and there are some things that are unfair, but like all you can do is try your best, right? But it's very, very, very difficult as a left-leaning person. Have you ever played video games?
Yeah.
Have you ever played League of Legends?
No.
Okay. This must be true of like sports. I would imagine. I never played like football or basketball, but I imagine that in sports, there's probably a difficulty sometimes where it's easy to blame teammates for your losses, right? I played a single-player game called StarCraft growing up, and I loved that game. It was one-on-one. If you lost, it was your fault, full stop. When you play team games, it's very difficult to figure out what's your fault or why did you lose? Was it my teammates? Did they fuck up? And you can get into a mindset where you start blaming everybody else, and what happens is you take no personal accountability. And the real mindset for improving in those games, and everybody knows this, even if they're upset at the time, even if I get upset, they'll tell you, the real mindset for improving is all you can do is take the most responsibility for your own actions as much as you can and try to improve on that. Sometimes you might be in unwinnable games where your teammates are causing you to lose, but who cares? Find out what you can improve on and go forward. And we know that's true for games. We probably know it's true for sports. But then as soon as we come into the real world, it's like, oh, you're black, you didn't get a job? They were probably racist. Oh, you're a woman, your application got turned over? They were probably sexist. How can you expect that mindset doesn't destroy a person's ability to navigate the world when they've constantly been told that classes around them are what are keeping them down, and the amount of I feel like the amount of personal agency you have goes
it rips,
so low.
it rips the agentic person out of it.
If we understand that locus of control has a big impact on your mental health, then I guess it would make sense as to why people who are more liberal or left-leaning would suffer more with mental health problems such as depression. Because when you think about the conservative framework, it very much gears someone more towards having an internalized locus of control, considering they have the whole, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. They are very big on personal responsibility and all that jazz. Whereas many on the left view life as being more of a team sport in a way. They have more of a collectivism approach to life in that they believe that everybody in society is kind of responsible for each other. I think that's the reason why they tend to be more in favor of government involvement, and they also tend to be more in favor of other members of society taking on a bigger role to help out other members of society. For example, that's where you get the whole tax the rich kind of stuff, where they think that the most privileged in society should share their wealth with those who are less privileged than them. And I guess one of the negatives to this kind of mindset is that if you believe that other people should help you, or that external forces have a lot of power over your life, it can be quite demoralizing if you're in a situation where you're not very happy with your life. Because if you don't believe that you have the power to control your outcomes or to control your life, then if you're in a situation where you're not happy with your life, you are naturally going to feel very demoralized because you don't believe you have the power to change your circumstances, because you believe external factors are the reason for your circumstances to begin with. But I guess that would also make sense as to why people who are left-leaning are also more likely to get involved in things like social justice. If a left-leaning person believes that external forces are the things that control their outcomes, then they're going to work harder to try and change those external forces, such as the government or such as the system or patriarchy, whatever the case may be. Because people with external locus of control are more likely to suffer with mental health problems, they are also more likely to use substances and develop addictions, as well as engaging in other self-destructive behaviors. The Springboard Center, which is a Texas-based outpatient addiction treatment facility, discusses the effects of victim mentality on addiction recovery. They state on their site that holding on to victim mentality will not serve you in the long run. It often prevents people from getting help at all. People often use victimhood to manipulate others to get what they want. They know evoking pity is more effective than anger. They may want money or other favors to enable their addiction, and they become adept at playing on their loved one's guilt. When they aren't playing the victim to get something, they may do it to avoid criticism or to parry demands to get sober. They may defend their addiction by saying something like, "I can't believe you would treat me like this, knowing what I've been through." Victimhood becomes both a rationalization and a defense mechanism against criticism. This is something that is quite common within rehab facilities, is that many facilities will try to internalize a person's locus of control and take them out of their victim mindset in order to help increase the likelihood of recovery. One of the things that comes to mind when I think of this is when Demi Lovato had the whole frozen yogurt gate. What was interesting about that scandal is some of Demi's biggest critics came from people who also suffered with eating disorders, with some even pointing out that one of the first things they learn within recovery is that they are responsible for their own triggers. So not only are people who have an external locus of control more likely to suffer with mental health problems and more likely to suffer with substance abuse or addictions, they are also more likely to be involved in criminality. Anastasia Lightning released a report titled "Exploring Locus of Control in Offender Cognition and Recidivism Paradigms." Basically, what she discussed was how those with an external locus of control are more likely to have regular run-ins with the law for a couple of reasons. So the concept is pretty much the same as it was for addiction. If someone has an externalized locus of control, then they're going to struggle to be rehabilitated. The same applies to criminality. If someone has a victim mentality or someone has an externalized locus of control, they are more likely to be a repeat offender. For example, if someone has the perspective of nothing I do can keep me out of getting locked up, so why bother? Why bother changing my behavior or pursuing a different path if being incarcerated is my fate? If someone has that kind of attitude and they don't believe that their actions or their own individual choices are going to influence their outcomes, they're more likely to kind of just do the actions that are going to get them there because they think they're already going to end up there anyway. Because people like this likely believe that the system's already rigged against them anyway. So when they do get arrested and they do get locked up, it just reinforces their idea that they were right all along. She argues that if this way of thinking is not interrupted, it will likely become more ingrained and extreme with time. She also talked about how people who have this kind of mentality, rather than being introspective and assessing how they ended up in that situation and what they could have done differently to avoid it, and therefore learning from that past mistake so that they don't repeat it again, someone with a victim mentality is likely to have run-ins with the law because they don't believe it was their fault in the first place. So therefore, they have no reason to self-analyze and be introspective to avoid being in that situation again. There have been multiple other studies conducted on the relationship between locus of control and criminality, such as this one that was published in 2020. What they were able to conclude from their research was that individuals who have offended tend to report having a more externalized locus of control than non-offending individuals, with this finding replicated across both adult and adolescent samples and a range of behaviors including sexual offending, drunk driving, parents at risk of child abuse, and shoplifting. Further within offending populations, individuals who have been involved in interpersonal violence have been found to have more of an externalized locus of control compared to non-violent offending controls. Individuals with an external locus of control are also reported to be more likely to reoffend than those with an internal locus of control. Thus, reorientating an individual's locus of control to a more internalized direction appears to be an important target for rehabilitative programs. There is a cost to encouraging people to view themselves as victims. Considering we know that the outcomes of people who have a more externalized locus of control are not very good, they have higher rates of repeating self-destructive behavior, they're more likely to suffer with mental health problems, they're more likely to abuse substances, they're more likely to be incarcerated or to indulge in criminality. Encouraging people to view themselves as victims does have a very hefty price. For the more privileged class, they might be able to benefit from having their career catapulted. But to the average everyday person, viewing yourself as a victim and believing that you have no control over your life has not proven to have favorable outcomes. Victim mentality might be very enticing, but ultimately it's very self-destructive. It often leads very many down a road of bitterness and resentment. It's a dead-end road down to self-destruction. Because when you get into a habit of blaming other people for your shortcomings, may that be your parents, may that be society, if you get into a habit of blaming other people for your situations and blaming other people for your outcomes, and never once paying attention to the common denominator in all of your scenarios, which is the person in your reflection, you are much more likely to not have a very fulfilling life. The only person you can control is yourself. You can't control anyone else. And so therefore you must focus on yourself and the things that you can do to improve your life, because those who do have much better outcomes. But that's it for this video. I would very much like to hear your personal thoughts on the victim mentality, what you personally think attracts people to the victim mentality. I would be interested to know, if you did used to have a victim mentality and you no longer have it, what was it that changed your perspective? And what was it that changed your mind in terms of how you viewed yourself and how you view the world? I would be very, very interested in reading your opinions down below. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, then you may as well like and subscribe. I am also on other socials if you'd like to check me out. Thank you for giving me your time today, and I will see you in my next video.